Chris Morris is in the house. We're going to be in conversation with him this afternoon with our friend and dear colleague, Marianne Golan. That's something. Yeah? Okay. Huh. Now, she is no stranger to this stage. She interviewed Jim Knockway. She interviewed Gilles Perez. Her long commitment to the people behind the camera is simply rare. She's been a stalwart champion of photography and photographers for publications and workshops, and as a mentor and a curator and a friend and mentor and member of the LOOK3 family. Around here, she's kind of like a younger sister to me. There's going to be name calling. It's going to be screaming. It's going to be a long car ride, but we're always going to make up by the end of the trip by the time we get there. Marianne's the thank you. Marianne's the assistant managing editor and director of photography at the Washington Post, Washington's largest English language daily. I want to welcome Marianne Golan. You may be the tallest interviewer we've ever had. Downstairs in the green room, everyone has signed the wall over the years. Everything from the Hack and Saw boys who played at the very first LOOK3 to other folks. If you look carefully at the very top, on the left is Jim Knockway. Jim Knockway was here 6/14/08. Marianne Golan was here 6/14/08. There's a little nick in there. And the addition with young Chris Morris is another victim, Christopher Morris, 6/18. I've known Chris for a long time, and I got to tell you, of all the people I've ever had introduced, I've known him longest, and I've known him. Like I knew Chris before I knew his work, and I knew him when he was Chris, and he had long, beautiful golden hair, and wore a keffiyeh and big white blousey shirts. He began his career as a war photographer in the 1980s, a witness to major foreign conflicts, including the U.S. invasion of Panama, the Persian Gulf War, and the wars in Afghanistan, Chechnya, and the former Yugoslavia. By 2000, he had completely reinvented himself as a White House photographer, covering the politics and the presidency of George W. Bush. From hotspots to haute couture, today you're more likely to find Chris in the pages of fashion magazines, as his work has evolved once again. He's the author of 2 books. The first, My America, focused on Republican nationalism during the Bush presidency. In Americans, his second book, published in 2012, he took a much broader journey across American society, presenting a nation in a state of perpetual loss, searching for an identity in the path of 2 long-running wars and an economy on the verge of collapse. He's a founding member of the Agency 7, a recipient of the Robert Capa Gold Medal, the Olivier Ribaud Award, several World Press Awards, and an Infinity Award from the International Center of Photography. Please welcome Christopher Morris.
Thank you. When I came out of Grozny in 2000, I called Michelle when I got back to Moscow and said, I don't want to do it anymore. Give me something else. And Diana Walker was retiring from the White House, and they assigned me to cover the White House, which in the end terrified me because it was going, you can continue on. It was going to be photographing a man in a suit for the rest of my career. And it became this. In conflict, you have such freedom. You go where you want to go. You wake up when you want to wake. There's nobody there with you. There's no writer. There's no fixer. There's no editor. At the White House, it was such a controlled. You're told where to sit, where to stand, when to eat, when to go home, when to be there, and it was very controlling. This is all with time, I had the opportunity several times to do behind the scenes with Bush. That was the real jewel of covering the White House, is to get this exclusive behind the scenes access. That's what I really enjoyed. And I always, because of historic value, I preferred it in black and white.
And how many times during the years of George W. Bush's administration, which, was 2 terms, how many times did you get the behind-the-scenes access?
It would happen once or twice a year.
Once or twice a year.
Yeah, they would put in a request. Usually when he would be up for Man of the Year, Person of the Year. In the beginning, I couldn't stand Bush. But towards the end, I actually started to like him as a man. I think he was a horrible president. He was led astray by Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, and all the handlers. He was not in control. He was not in control of the White House. And you could sense that. This is in the private residence, the elevator that goes upstairs. They're going to dinner.
Talk a little bit about the Cheney relationship and what you saw. I mean, we're going to come up on some pictures in a minute that'll have more meaning if you can give some context to that.
Yes, Tommy Frank's practicing the Medal of Freedom for their invasion of Iraq. It's kind of behind the scenes. Yeah, no, it's these are. This is him riding his bicycle. And this next picture I really like because I had this opportunity. He has this is in 2004, so it was when the iPod first came out. And he stopped to pick a song, and I remember I was like, oh my God, I got to get this picture. And I ran up to him, and he showed me his Brown-Eyed Girl, Van Morrison song. But yeah, it was very challenging. There was, you'll come up on this last picture, every Thursday the president and vice president would have lunch. And in 2004, I was able to the White House photographer gets to do this picture all the time. It's very rare for for basically a journalist. But at this time, Cheney was still kind of in control. It's interesting, this back thing over Cheney's left shoulder, that's where Clinton was doing Monica Lewinsky. That's the private study. It never happened in the Oval Office. They have people. But this was shot for National Geographic. This is later. This is 2008. Bush made him wait for 20 minutes, sit there with me in the room. Cheney was very upset that he was made to wait in there. I could see that Bush had finally fell in. This was my only National Geographic assignment. I wanted to photograph color. I own my archive. Time doesn't own it. And I wanted to be able to photograph Bush. I wanted an archive of him, and who could I convince to allow me to get access? I figured, let me try National Geographic. At first, they were like, no way, we'll never put George W. Bush in the magazine. So then they came back. They liked the idea of doing a thing on the Office of the Presidency. So they wanted me to photograph the Office of the Presidency, but never show his face. So I had to go around and do all these odd crops, which was quite fun. But again, because I'm there, I'm still going to. For me, it's it's always about, for me, this anthropological archive, a study of people and places and time, from everything from heads of state to photographing out on the street.
Well, you said something to me earlier when we were talking about your time in the White House. I remember teasing you once and saying on one trip that you'd gone on after seeing a big take of yours come in, Chris, on this next trip, will you please try to remember to take pictures of the president?
Yeah.
And you talked about how someone had told you that you should treat this time covering there as a grant.
Well, when I received it in 1990, I was good friends with Gilles Perez, and that's when I was offered the contract with Time, and he told me that this would either ruin my career or make my career to use it as a grant. And I know she hates this ratio, but Time had a specific product they needed. This is one of those pictures to shoot
Nat
for
Geo, yeah.
Nat Geo. They had a certain picture that Time needed for the magazine, and it wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but I knew that how I could photograph the president and provide the product that Time needed. So I always had kind of a ratio of It's like the happy family saying goodbye. I had a ratio, and Michelle and Marianne heard me say this once, and they came up and said, don't ever say that in public again. But I would shoot 70% for myself and 30% for the client.
And when you say 70% for yourself and 30% for your client, when your client is in the audience, it's generally not a good idea.
But the thing is, the problem is with photography and publications and media, there's a certain product that they want, and it doesn't usually fit what you want to carry on for your legacy. There's a certain media image that they want, and once you know what that is, once I felt that I had that, I could move on. I'm not shooting for the wires. I didn't have to stay focused on a podium of the president.
No, but in
for 2
fairness,
hours.
Chris, a lot of your work was published in Time that wasn't just wire service photos.
No. But when the next phase, which came to my career, I started becoming intrigued with the nationalism, and I'm not sure what's next. What's next after this?
We go right to Iraq.
So we go. Yeah, this is an interesting story. This to me I titled this My Liberated Iraqi, Operation Freedom or whatever it was.
Operation Desert Storm.
No, this is the
Oh, this
invasion
is, sorry,
2003.
yeah, right.
Where we supposedly liberated the Iraqis.
This was during a sandstorm, which is why it has that color, right?
Marianne had called me. My wife was 8 months pregnant. It's 2003. I had just come back from the White House, and I got a call, and my wife was picking me up at baggage claim in Tampa, Florida, and I got a call from Marianne. She says, Chris, I need to know right now if you will do an embed for the invasion of Iraq. And I said, can I think about it? And she says, no, I need the answer right now. So I told
really
her,
was not that.
No, but you needed the name. You needed the name.
No, the problem was, and Chris knows the truth of this, is that we were told we were getting no embeds. And just so everybody understands the situation, we were told we were getting no embeds for photographers, that all of our embeds were going to writers. And Michelle and I and several other members of the staff took a very strong stand and said, that's absurd. We have to have some of the positions in the embedded positions with the U.S. military for photographers, and they said no. And then they came to us on the day we had to turn in the list of names and said, you can have 3 slots, but we need the names in 3 hours. And Michelle and I both made the 2 phone calls, and I think the reason that I called you, Chris, is she thought you'd be more likely to say yes to me.
No. So I didn't tell my wife for a while, and then like gas masks started arriving, chemical suits, flak jackets, and but I promised her I wouldn't leave until my daughter was born, and so I actually missed my embed. But I still was able to, my friends tell me I was so prepared, I brought my own colonel with me. I live in a very Republican area of Florida, Tampa, Florida. It's the headquarters of CENTCOM. And my next door neighbor was a colonel at CENTCOM. And I convinced Time to let me take him. He took vacation time, and I hired him as my driver and fixer. And so when Gary Knight and my other 7 photographers saw me show up, they said, God, Chris is so prepared. He brought his own colonel. But that's how I got to was able to embed, actually unofficially, because I missed because my daughter wasn't born until March, and the invasion was April. Yeah, my daughter was born March. See, I forget my daughter was born March 5th. So I still dabbled. I still went back to war. I went in 2002 to Afghanistan with Special Forces. So I still miss it. I still miss conflict photography, but again, it is. In 2011, I went to Libya for Time for over a month, but I went on the government side, on Gaddafi's side.
This is in one of the palaces.
Yeah, we can change to the next. I want to
Yeah,
get back
we can
to
move forward.
so back to this 30-70% and this. So this book, I don't know the exact number, but there's 100 images in it and only one image time published. You say you guys published a lot from it, but not from the series in the book. Sorry, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus.
Yes,
but they let me, but they encouraged me. I had a lot of encouragement, especially from Alice Gabriner. She loved what I was doing. She loved the agents, the lips, the chairs. I started to play on this fear and paranoia in America. It was a nation that I liken the term, it had wrapped its eyes so tightly in red, white, and blue, it went blind. Blind with...
Can you talk a little bit for the photographers?
Blind with nationalism.
Blind with nationalism, I agree. And you also said that part of your being so controlled and so boxed in, and it was funny because Alice was sharing with us all the time how she saw your vision changing. And you said that you started to like to look at the world with more of the eye that the rest of the world saw with, instead of a camera eye. So you actually changed that. A lot of your work had been very, very wide angle, and you started...
Well, very fluid. My work was very fluid. This was like a very Republican world. Everything was clean and perfect and orderly. I had in 2001, I had a very rare commercial assignment for IBM. And the art director at the first dinner, he looked at me and said, "You know, Chris, the client loves your work, but I think it's terrible. You're a terrible photographer." And it kind of took me back. And he explained to me, he says, "You use too much wide angle." He says, "Wide angle in advertising is used for humor." And I went back and I looked at my work and I started to see what he said. So it took me a while to kind of fall in. 2002, 2003, I started shooting everything very structured. Tried to see more like the human eye. I started shooting everything from 40 millimeter to 70 millimeter. I'm not against wide angle. It's just the way that you use wide angle. I think that photojournalism, when I look back through the history of the masterpieces of photography, when you look at Eugene Smith and you go through the true masterpieces, even though Jim and Gilles, they use 28 a lot, they shoot kind of the way the human eye sees. And I think that for my generation, the generation that came about in the late 80s and early 90s, we were given a lens by Canon and Nikon. First it was the 20 to 35, and then it eventually morphed into a 16 to 35. And there's all this talk about manipulation, but I call it the Salvador Dali lens because it gives a manipulated view of the world. It's unrealistic. You create drama with the lens. And I started to shoot this way because I was trying to allow the subject to create the drama and not the
This was one of my
lens
favorite pictures. If we could hold
create
here
the
for a
drama.
second,
Yeah,
I would
it's okay.
like to say something about it.
Sorry, I get going on that.
Something that the president did, and I loved it, Chris. I mean, I loved this picture so much, and we fought really, really hard to get this one in the magazine, is that when President Bush was president and he was nervous, he would spin his wedding ring. And this is actually a picture of him spinning his wedding ring. Can you see his hand? He would spin it around on his finger. And it was something that you noticed from watching him for so long. But I remember that that's how we actually talked them into
I was actually bored of looking at his face.
Anyway, I thought it was kind of cool that he spinned his wedding ring.
This is actually the only one you guys really published, was the convention. Sorry.
No, after the book came out.
Yeah, they did. They actually published pictures. It's when the book came out. They gave me a...
Jeez, he's not going to cut me a break no matter what. Oh, man, you said it. Yeah, I thought I'm the victim here. Okay, so the Americans. So what happened? This book came out, and
well, there was a lot of stuff. The art director I used on my first book, she was a student. She helped me edit the book, and she wouldn't let me put a lot of images in my book, the first book. So I had a lot of leftover images, and I kept photographing in America. So I wanted to do a broader look at the country. Yeah. So some of it actually runs from 2004 till 2012. I did some road trips across America, even after Obama was elected. This is in Guantanamo, Cuba. It looks like middle of America, but it's in Guantanamo. So wherever I went, I didn't, and this bit about the way photographers, this is in Mosul, Iraq, one of the headquarters of ISIS now. This bit of the way we photographers manipulate in terms of where you point the camera. When I saw somebody looking depressed, I would photograph them. If I saw children playing in a park or something, I didn't go rush to take their pictures. Or so it didn't fit the theme I was going for.
But you said that the world started, it opened a new way for you looking at the world, because it's definitely informed your work. It changed it in a pretty dramatic way.
This is in Sanford, Florida, during the Trayvon Martin thing. But to me, all my work is about symbolism. It's very subtle symbolisms of trying to
This is Katrina.
convey a feeling. Yeah, this is Katrina.
That's a woman in a wheelchair who died, was left behind.
But I was a real admirer of Stephen Shore, Gregory Kretzen, Mark Cohen.
So do you think that sort of influenced
It absolutely influenced me, especially knowing their work and just the way of trying to put structure in the world. I always try to feel like I want to trap the viewer in my composition. I realize sometimes it gets very stale and boring, but to me it's photography that will stand the test of time, because you can move around and you find things over time. You can revisit it 20, 30 years from now, more so than my war work.
I respectfully disagree, though. I don't think this work is boring at all, Chris.
Yeah. Well, some people. My father, he was never really proud of me during my career as a war photographer. It wasn't until I covered the White House that he was very proud of me. And when he heard from my sister that I was doing a book, he got very offended because I had showed her the book dummy. And there was one night he asked me, he was over, and he said, "Can I see the book?" And he flipped through it, and he looked at me, and he almost had tears in his eyes. And he said, "That's the worst photography I'd ever seen." And in the sense of
And you said we were tough on you.
Well, he was upset that he wanted to see pictures of the glorious Dick Cheney and his heroes.
No, I understand.
This is interesting. This is, because I think it's coming to an end. This is Obama when he went to address the cadets. It was towards the end of Time stopped covering the White House in 2009. I thought it was something that I would care. I was so excited to stay on the White House and cover the Obama years, but I knew the writing on the wall was coming. This was for a German magazine at West Point, the rugby team, but the symbolism in here is just, it's heavy for me. It's a nation fatigued by war. So that's what I talk about when I say trying to have like symbolism in my photography. Always these kind of like dark men in black Secret Service agents, as you all know I'm familiar with. I've learned what to say.
Okay, so let's hold here for a second. So I think this is a point at which we could talk about like how, with the economics changing, in 2008, I read the writing on the wall. It's actually when I resigned from Time magazine, because I realized it wasn't going to be doing the kind of work that I enjoyed doing, which was really hardcore journalism, hardcore photojournalism. And around that same time, Time stopped covering the White House, and then you've stayed. You have a professional affiliation with Time. But you put out these couple of books, and then these books were seen by someone in Italy who got very excited about your work?
Well, what happened is 2009, I took a 90% pay cut overnight. I had built my thought in my career that I would retire with Time magazine. I had said it was just such a beautiful career, and they treated me phenomenally well. It was an amazing company to work for, amazing editors, amazing colleague, and all of a sudden it was over. And I didn't know what to do, and I burned through my savings in around 3 months, and I got a call from an Italian fashion magazine. My America was given as a gift to the editor-in-chief of Amica, and they called me to photograph fashion in New York, the Ralph Lauren stores. They had an essay they wanted to do on mannequins in a Ralph Lauren store, and they figured I could photograph Republicans well. So that's how I got the assignment. It's true. They figured they found the perfect thing, and it took me almost. Originally, they had me just doing store windows, going to different cities around the world, photographing fashion in windows, like window displays.
You can start going now with the images. But we've sort of moved from war to politics, and now
And then
fashion.
eventually they gave me to do editorials where I was given a model and all this. This is one of the ones I'm fondest of because I had to come up with the idea and the concept of this Louis Vuitton. It's the Louis Vuitton collection, and it's 2011, and they're known for travel, so we did it in the Air and Space Museum outside Paris. But the problem is with this type of photography, it goes against everything for 20 years of my career that I had done, because everything is staged, everything is manipulated, everything is created, and it's the complete opposite of photojournalism. But I found it very challenging, and it was still photography, so I I figured I would try it out, and to be honest with you, I haven't done fashion for a couple of years. People keep saying, "Oh, I do fashion." I haven't done it. I did it for a good 4 or 5 years, and I've kind of dropped off because you're given a budget, let's say $10,000. They're given a budget to produce a piece, but you have to rent the museum, you have to get the models, you have to get the hair and makeup, you got to get the lights.
It's not like you're making a ton of money.
No. So in the end, you end up you bust your ass and you get $500 or something, and it's like wow, it's a lot of work. But I'm still proud of the work. I still like the creative process.
Well, it's interesting, Chris, too, that you've always photographed sort of beautiful things, and I mean, there's always been a sort of a beauty in the pictures, and particularly of the Americans. There was a lot of beauty in that work, and I wondered if then you needed juxtapositions with it. If you thought at all about how elegiac a lot of this work became, juxtaposing these extraordinarily beautiful women and sometimes very stark.
Well, I basically wanted to run away from the ugliness of the world, and there's a lot of beauty there. There's a lot of darkness out there. I remember when I was a conflict photographer, I could not understand people, how they could go on their lives and they weren't concerned with the world. But over the years, I've realized people just want to survive. They want to get on with their lives.
Talk about that.
This is, if you can hold this for a second, I don't know if it's possible. This was a fashion magazine in Paris, because eventually the Italian thing fell through. The editor-in-chief was fired, and I went to France, and I hit all the fashion magazines in Paris. And because I was a war photographer and I had covered the White House, I was able to get my foot in the door rather easily to the fashion magazine. One thing in the fashion world, in the photojournalism world, to me, of amazing talent is in the hundreds. In the fashion world, it's in the thousands. There's amazing fashion photographers. So I was like, how is this going to pull off? But this fashion magazine in Paris wanted me to do a fashion shoot at the White House, and I'm like, can't do it. And I'm like, but I can do it at the Republican convention. But and it wasn't easy to pull off. I originally approached Time, and I says, can I get an assistance pass for the floor to run? And then I said I need to do a portrait of a woman, and then eventually I had to let Jeff at the Senate know, and I had to get permission from the Republicans to do it. And so this is this. You can let it run. But
Yeah.
it was anybody that's
cool.
covered a convention, to know that I was able to get a model into the convention
kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. Especially that 2012, because I had to get a vehicle. I ended up getting 5 passes and a vehicle pass. So Jeff would come to me and say, here's your passes. I'd have 2. And then I'd meet the other guy, Mark, and he'd say, did you get your passes? I'd say, no, I didn't get my passes. So he'd give me 2 more passes. So it's kind of how I worked my way. I brought her up to the C&M booth. Put her in the C&M booth.
So awesome.
It's crazy, yeah. Whatever. So whatever, these are just different things that I've done that I like. It's not our world. I realize that's not what you've come here for the festival, but it's still photography. Trying to be creative. And again, you see, I have a UFC from, it's a carryover from the My America, this fascination with lips and getting, it was Charles Omni during when we were covering Bush. I'd be on the rope line, there'd be some 14-year-old girl looking at the president with her mouth open. I'd be there for like 10 minutes and Charles would come and kick me and say, you know, you look like a pedophile, please get away, leave her alone, you know. Because I use the gear I use a 24-70 as my main lens, so it's like you have a Hasselblad.
Really close.
It's big. It's not like I'm shooting with a Leica. So people notice you. This is more recent work. This was shot 6 months ago. This is recent work. I was hired to shoot Lara Stone for Letitia Casta on a film she made.
So talk about that. Now, from the fashion work that you were doing, you started being hired to do identity.
I got discovered by my work again because of the politics war in fashion by an agent for Letitia Casta. She's a famous French model and actress, and she commissioned me to do a story on her. And I discovered a new in Europe, celebrities, they want to have control over their image. So instead of a magazine, let's say Paramount, coming in and doing a story on Letitia Casta, the artists themselves will commission a photographer to do a body of work, let's say when she has a film coming out, and then the artist produces you can go change this, please. So the artist produces a body of work, and then you sell that to the clients.
We're back with Obama. We move around a little bit here because all of your worlds sort of weave together in an interesting way. So now
Time had called me to go back to the White House.
One day.
One day.
He had one day to
shoot
shoot a cover.
A lot of pressure. They said shoot vertical, shoot vertical, shoot vertical, which I normally don't shoot vertical. So this is this series. So I still go back to...
This is one day, but you had all that experience behind you that you're coming in to a room you're familiar with, to a place that you're familiar with. Did that help to...
Yeah, and not to be intimidated. To
Right.
me, it's a man in a suit.
Yep.
It does not, there's no intimidation involved. I do not know President Obama that closely. He does not know me. I'm sure he was briefed on me by Pete Souza. He was very, very comfortable with me. But again, it's more of the technical pressure to make sure you give a product for the client. But in a situation like this, I am this 70-30 thing. I'm given 100% for the magazine. When it's behind the scenes stuff, you know, I'm not going to sit and photograph.
Not going to do the 30-70 thing.
Yes.
Okay.
King of Jordan. Is everybody okay? I hope we're not.
Yeah, you guys
boring.
doing good out there?
This is an interesting moment. We were going back. It was the First Lady's birthday, and they encountered her, and she pulled away from him. He went to kiss her because she didn't recognize me, and I could sense who is this? She wasn't comfortable. That's the elevator that goes up to the residence, by the way. So he pursued her. It's kind of a nice, tender moment. He goes off into the corner. And then you have the next one.
Yeah, he wanted that kiss.
He wanted that kiss. But you see her arms. She was still very...
Yeah, she was still...
and here he gives her a kiss. And... but exciting. I love those opportunities. I've had lots of opportunities to photograph different heads of states. This is him now walking back. I don't have multiple cameras. I use one camera, one lens, like I said, the 24-70. It's so versatile. Another time, him walking back. And they had all these mock-ups of these. But again, I don't like, you see the thing coming out of his head?
Yep.
The window. You don't have control. I do much better when people aren't working. Even here, you've got the pole coming out of his head. I told them to keep him up 5 seconds. They said it was too short. They made him 15 seconds.
Yeah, Chris likes to go.
Now, originally, I had a controller, and we went through the rehearsal, and they took it away from me. They said, you're not going to have the controller. This is interesting. I'm showing this back. And I had dabbled with video. So after this, I'll show you a video, and it shows you how whenever I have an assignment, be it a fashion, anything I do, I squeeze as much out of it as I can get. And you can go to the next one, I guess, in this end. It's a short film. So you'll recognize from the Americans book, this should play. So even while shooting the stills, time didn't ask me to shoot video. I just did it on my own. When the video person, the internet person at times saw the things, he hated it. He says, we can't use it. The music is Russian. They says, what does a Russian folk song have to do with the U.S. military? But it had he said, your videos have no place on the time. He's called it my site. This was an old editor at the time.
Yeah, who's not there
But to me, the Russian folk song, if you go on my website, you can see the films. It had a lot to do with it because...
So this led you to the Italian aristocracy.
Yeah, but I want to finish on,
Okay.
sorry.
All right.
The song was Russian because of how many Russian cadets. It was almost like this Russian folk song was now haunting. It was our turn. It was our turn in Afghanistan. It was a speech about deploying troops to Afghanistan. And this was, to me, this voice, this haunting voice of, because of how many Russian cadets we killed in the 80s in Afghanistan. This is interesting. This was for the fashion magazine. I was given complete access to the Italian presidency for one day. This is all done in one day. I had no handlers. They just let me alone. I could go anywhere I want. It was because I wasn't Italian. Everybody left me alone. Not even any of the Italian photographers were there. Berlusconi's photographer was only there for around 5 minutes, and then he had to leave the room. But I love this bit of being able to have access to people of power. Again, I take great pride of what I can squeeze out of one afternoon and one opportunity in a place.
So when you say one day, when did the day start and when did it end?
It probably started around 10, 11 in the morning. It ended around 10 that night. There was a function during the day and a function during the night. And when everybody went to lunch, they left me alone in the palace, and I walked around and went into rooms and took pictures, just like architectural pictures.
And this was for a fashion magazine?
This was for that Amica, yeah. And the editor ended up getting fired because of one of that essay, because the publisher wanted to know, what does a woman's magazine have to know about politics? What do women need about politics? This was this Letitia Casta. She commissioned me. I went into her home in Paris. She had a film coming out. These are with the iPhone. These are in her bedroom. This is while I was in the other room setting up with lights and stuff. This is when I discovered the power of the iPhone, that it was not a phone. It's actually a camera with a phone in it. I kind of understood this is a camera. This was an early morning shot. It was hard to photograph her because she went swimming, and I took one frame of her in the pool, and she got out and she said, "Show me." So I was very nervous, and luckily she was happy with it, the exposure. I was actually more stressful doing this than any of the political thing, because it's in a world that it's different for me, this whole celebrity thing. But they were so happy with the coverage. After this, she invited me to go to her home in Corsica without the stylist and makeup to photograph her and her family. And she said, because she's had two husbands she has children from two husbands, they wouldn't agree to allow me to photograph her children. And I says, well, I'm going to your home with the children. You have to trust me. Let me photograph your children. The pictures are yours. I can't be restricted. So she trusts me to shoot. These I like because it's this kind of scariness of beauty. It's this theme. This is just the stylist coming in to adjust, but to me, they're all very creepy, very, very, very dark. So even when everything is still being staged and set up, I'm always shooting, always shooting. So this is kind of where I am at now. I'm doing more of this kind of celebrity things. I did Selma Hayek when she went to Lebanon. This is in Corsica, where we went to Corsica with no stylist, and I photographed her children, became really, really good friends with her, which has led to more work. It's like I'm like everybody in this room. I'm trying to survive. This is her in the morning. She came out, sat down next to me. It was like, oh. And again, I've been very passionate about photography, and I'm very honored to be here. But I'm like every one of you in this room. We've all had the same dream. We all had that childhood dream. We all wanted to be photographers. We all want to live that dream, and that's why I like to give back. And people say, "Oh, I'm so friendly." It's because I was you. I was 17, 18, and had the same dream. And I've been fortunate to being able to live it, even though it is a constant. I won't sugarcoat it. It's a very difficult industry. It's an industry of constantly clinging on with your fingernails, of getting people to pay or find jobs, where you're going to work, and when you do work, having to wait 90 days, 120 days for people to pay. It's a difficult profession, but I wouldn't change it for anything, because you're not locked into an office. You see the world. You can hang with homeless people, you can hang with refugees, you can hang with presidents, you can hang with celebrities. There's no other profession in the world that gives you that kind of life vision. So for all the struggles that you're up against, just if you can bear it, be persistent, because it can be a wonderful life if you don't mind poverty.
And so, as you follow...
We're coming to the end here, so...
No, it's okay. We're doing good.
Change.
We're doing good.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end, and there's a frame right after this one. We have to speed up just a little teeny bit of you and your newfound friend. And
I fell in love with the phone, by the way. That was that Hipstamatic. I was like, wow, this is cool.
There's Chris
Right.
and his subject.
Yeah. I almost fell off the cliff up there. I was walking backwards, and this guy grabbed me, and it was like a 400-foot drop.
Okay, so now we're with royalty.
And then I got a call from Paris Match that the Paris Match photographer, the Princess of Monaco, kicked out the Paris Match photographer, and they asked me if I could go have a meeting with her to see if she likes me. And they said, please dress nice. I didn't have a suit jacket or anything, and so I was in the south of France, so I went to Monaco and met her, and she wanted to commission me to photograph the baptism of her children, twins. The prince had to produce a male, he had to produce an heir, otherwise Monaco would revert back to France. So these twin, the crown prince is on the right, or maybe on the left. But I had such access, I even went in the royal box. I mean, I was like, It was an amazing opportunity, and I've become really good friends with them, and she has me do a lot of their photography. They wanted me to sign, the Palace wanted me to sign an agreement where they own everything. I could not do anything. And I said, I can't sign it, and I refused to sign it. I put my foot down, I refused to sign it. They have in-house, they have a staff of 4 photographers and a
They make a
photo
living
guy,
off of the pictures.
and they sell the pictures. It's the first time that an outside photographer has been allowed into the Palace. These are different fashion things I did for her. I was just in California, she was in California. I'm kind of trying to con them into making me like an archivist to photograph the growing up of the children.
So this is like a picture. Stop for 1 second. It's very interesting because you said this is the kind of picture, even when you're photographing royalty. Now where it's
This is in the Palace. This is Grace Kelly's former office.
right. So it feels like this image feels like it has, you know, weight and there's like some mystery of what their relationship's about and stuff. And you said this is the kind of picture they hate. The magazines hate.
Well, it's too dark.
Yeah, and then you go to the next image.
The Palace doesn't like it either. No, we think we took it out.
All right, we took
This
it
is interesting. They brought me there to do their Christmas card, and they fought. So now I've went from war to being a baby photographer.
There you go.
They left the 2 twins. She came in the morning in her bathrobe. She handed me the kids with my assistant for like an hour. So I have pictures of me holding the 2 twins. This was on their Independence Day. This was around the same trip as a different day. This is me just testing the lighting. She came down. This is going to be the official portrait in Monaco. If you go into the banks or in the post office, my picture is hanging. So the staff photographers at the Palace, they hate me because she does not want them around the children. And
That's the one that you see when you go in the bank.
in the post office, yeah.
The post office, the bank.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing now. But again, here, this is something no outside photographer has ever been allowed to see this or do this behind the scenes. They had an incident in the 1950s where I believe it was a Magnum photographer, photographed Grace Kelly and Rainier, and they gave a box set of prints to the Palace. And I'm not sure in the 1980s, Magnum, I believe it was Magnum, because I was told by the Palace photographer, this is why they have this agreement they want me to sign. They got sued, the Palace got sued because they were selling that photograph. And the agency sued the Palace, and I think the Palace lost. So they had this strict policy of no photography. So I kind of fought that and won. I basically had a talk to the prince at one point because he says, why didn't you bring your family? And I said, I can't afford to bring my family. And because originally they did not want me to even put the pictures on my website. And I said, you have to allow me to sell the photographs. So through her lawyer, I have to run photos by to be cleared before I can sell them. And we're kind of coming to an end.
No, we have to. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of...
So now, you saw last night, I dabble in film. You can start to think. I had a commercial job in France, and I discovered this amazing camera, the Phantom camera. And I shot this in the studio, and the client actually didn't use it. They hated it also. Another one where the client didn't go for it. But I discovered this camera, it alters time. It's not still photography and it's not film. It's something in between. The mist you see is actually me spraying a water bottle. And each one of these clips is around 1 second. You don't even see the blink of the eye. And it was from this project that I approached Kira and Paul at Time Magazine and said, I want to do a project on powerful people. I wanted to go into the Oval Office and film Obama. I wanted to bring the camera. I realized this is 1 second.
Right.
So if they only give me a portrait for 5 minutes, what can I do? I only need 15 seconds with the president. I just need to bring the camera around his face like that. And I would have this beautiful moving image around the president. And so that was the genesis of this thing on the candidates, but it never went through because the equipment's expensive to rent the gear. But this was the...
Who was your client?
It was a perfume company with a pianist called Lang Lang. He came out with a perfume, and they saw my film work on my website of how I photographed people, faces and people, and they wanted to convey that. And they actually had me photograph on the street, but I refused. They wanted me to get model releases from the people I filmed, and I says I can't do that. I said we need to do it in the studio, and that's how we ended up doing the studio. So now I'm going to show you, this is where last night, the Trump thing is actually a 9-minute long. I did each candidate, so Paul couldn't show it. This is kind of where the one let off last night.
We're just going to show you.
No, back up, go back, yeah. And
Start
this should
it there.
play. Maybe it'll play.
There you go.
And you hear the sound. Hear me out here. That's Trump's voice. That's not music. We would record the audio of Trump speaking, and it's stretched to the same frame rate as the camera. So if you think of 1 second of a vowel, and you stretch that into a minute, and you get this eerie. So we don't have to, I made them cut short, and don't
One
play
more.
this one yet. My work, this kind of work, it's really something not to watch in the office. It's really something at night, kids are in bed, you go to bed, put your headphones and watch it. It is really weird, it's really spooky. This is one of my favorite ones, it's Jeb Bush. It's like the symbolism, it's like the dying of the Republican Party, the old party. And when the clips, when I would, after the event, I would come back with the technician and we would open up the files and look at the files. It was creepy, you know, because you don't really see, if this is my subject, to film this, the camera movements are like this. You like paint with the camera, you run, you do these weird, and you have to know, you don't start the camera's always rolling. You have to tell the camera when to stop, so you have to trigger it. Otherwise, the file will get written over. You have around a 4-second window to hit stop, or you lose what you're filming. So that, you can play now. So just giving you a little.
Hello? Yeah. Leroy and Leo, thank you so much for your service to this country. What an honor for me and Jeb Jr., who's here, and my wife and...
Sorry. So again, that's Jeb Bush's voice. It's this altered dimension. It's a dimension that the human eye can't see, but it's there. when I sat at time doing the final edits, and I had Nancy Gibbs, the editor-in-chief, and all these lawyers and everybody waiting to come and see, I was convinced there's no way they're going to let me keep my edit. And they did, which hats off to them, because it's not normal journalism. It's like this weird David Lynch kind of it's like this. To film this, I actually have to run by them. I'm not walking by them. There's all these weird, it was really a new way to see.
Are you always looking for a new way to see, Chris?
Well, it's this, there are different ladders in life. It's like, this isn't working, let me get on this ladder and try this ladder. This one doesn't work, and I get on another. Okay, we can stop. It's a difficult camera too, because you need an extreme amount of light, because you're shooting at such a high frame rate. But no, thank you.
I want to ask you, thank you. I wanted to ask you one last question. If you, right now, if you didn't have, it's funny, you spoke quite eloquently, and I thank you for that, for this audience, about the difficulties of working as a photographer, how you explained to me in several of our conversations about our talk today, that you've sort of followed the people and the direction of continuing to support your family, ways to continue to support your family. Okay, these people are interested in my vision, so I'm going to take myself there. So if you didn't have that weight on your shoulders, like if you were at this moment right now where you didn't feel like, you know, I've got to do whatever I've got to do for whomever is going to pay me, what would you choose to do?
Well, that's a fantasy question.
No, it's not a fantasy question, because you never know. You know, I mean, what if? What would you want to do?
I would like to make a movie.
Really? You'd like to make a full
a full documentary.
Full documentary.
Yeah.
On what subject?
I have several in my mind. I don't really want to say. What I do. But yeah, I would like to be given the budget to do a documentary. It's interesting, the film work, whenever stuff happens and they say, oh, well, you're going to direct the film, and they're going to get you a camera person. It's like, no, I want to operate the camera. To me, it's about being the camera operator. It's not like I don't want to be a director. I want to be a camera operator. To me, it's the craft of the camera.
Well, you know, who knows? There could be somebody out in this audience who's going to let you make that documentary.
Craft of
Thank you,
composition.
Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.